Welcome and wait, maybe just Brez. Welcome to NyuMu, the most consistent new music podcast recorded in a college closet, covering the latest in music from all around the globe. Even though I think almost all of the albums that we're gonna be talking about today came from America. Let's just keep that all around the globe thing in like your conscious. It's not just like a this thing. This episode, is an exception. Okay, so first we're gonna start things off with our new project mixed, and as you will see later, we're gonna have some different things today. It's not gonna be like a regular episode, probably because like literally no interesting music really released last week. I was gonna talk about Maxo Cream, Pumpkin. You should go check his shit out. But I feel like it's just really not sitting well with me for some personal reasons. So I'm just like, yeah, maybe no Maxo Cream. But hey, I support the guy. You should definitely go check him out, just not for this podcast. All right. First album we're gonna talk about today. I hope I pronounced this right. Muyassar Kurdi with Traveling. This is an avant-garde noise. I don't even know. It's listed as being electronic music, but it's not very electronic at all. So essentially, you have Miss Kurdi. I'm just gonna call her Miss Kurdi because I don't know how to pronounce her first name, and I hope that's not disrespectful. But Miss Kurdi and a bassist by the name of Nicholas. Damn, how do you pronounce his last name? Shit. Jarwaski. Jazwike, maybe. He's essentially he's playing the violin, the cello, and the bass, the double bass on this album. And first song, Falling, features like really interesting and strange grunting noises from Nicholas in the background. And then of course you have throughout the entire record, Miss Curdy's just howling and screeching and incessant, like really just energetic vocal delivery. And I don't know why I just used the word incessant. I don't even know what that word means. It just felt like a good word. It was just like some word soup there. Um, and another like interesting kind of aspect of the vocal delivery, in terms of her voice, is that on this song in particular, it has like this descending kind of like start high, go low. Not really an arpeggio by any means because she's not going back and forth, but she's like this descending vocal structure that is like really weird and like ominous. It has this sort of mysterious noir aspect, like it's like somebody just got killed and the detective just drove to the crime scene kind of feel. And it just this album is such a soundscape, such a representation of emotions, and this part in particular just felt like that for me. I like these albums where I listen to them, and, there's no actual words on the album. They're just like sounds, no audible words, no intelligible words, and you know, I feel like that kind of place that it takes me to is just like a good mind space to be in, where you just get to kind of imagine or like paint the music as you hear it. If you hear it as crazy garbage, then you hear it as crazy garbage, I guess. But I'm not really interested in like critiquing this. I just like kind of want to pick it apart and analyze it and be like, huh, this kind of brings me back to this point in my life, or this kind of brings me back to this kind of sound that I've heard before. Like this game just, I'm not this game. This song reminds me of like playing LA Noir and just like looking at the fucking busted up, disgusting, dilapidated bodies in that game and like trying to inspect and see if you can find all the clues and shit. So that's just, for that song, that's the vibe I was getting. They have the next song, Descended, which for a little bit is just like just Miss Curdy's vocal delivery, and then a bold and like I think there's some like bass playing, some like bass playing, and then comes in like a bold bass or cello. I'm not sure, and it produces this very intense like atmosphere where her voice is kind of accommodating more to like the bowed cello or bass's delivery, and you get this really interesting interplay between them. And it's just like the more tense the cello gets, the more tense she gets, and you can feel the tension in the air. It's crazy. There's no air though. It's this metaphoric air. I guess there was air when they were produced this, but that is what it is. It has this like weary soundingness to it. It's just intense. And I found that again, like this album is conveying like a very emotional emotionally vast palette, it seems like. And all doing all of that without words. Next, we got I Know When You Are Close from the same album, Traveling, of course. This song is very representative of the interplay between the vocalist and the string performance that I talked about a little bit. This is an improvised album, to my knowledge. So all this just came together. There's no like, formal, like we wrote down these notes. It feels improvised. It is improvised. And the sonic dialogue between these two performers is both strange and interesting because it's like organic, of course, because it's improvised, but cohesive. It does not feel contrived. It doesn't feel like they're doing nothing. It feels strange at times because I wondered how exactly this came together. How do you feel like when you want to take a song a certain place when there's no song, there's no structure, there's no plan? How do you know how long a certain song should be? How do you know whether or not something will sound good before you do it? Your partner, I guess it's more so of the bassist or the string player. I'm just gonna call him the Nicholas a string player generally because he plays 3 instruments. At least that's from what I could hear. You just he has to follow where her voice takes him, essentially, because if he starts doing something else crazy, then maybe she would have to catch up. And it just seems like she kind of controls the melody across the album. And I just want to know, I just would have liked to be there when they were kind of putting this together. I want to know how much planning there was, if there was any planning at all, if it's just a completely improvised project, which I could very well believe. I almost considered doing an entire episode on this just because, there weren't that many quality out or interesting. Let me not say quality because that makes it sound like I'm critiquing and I'm just saying like shitting on, certain albums and shit like that, but I'm not. There weren't that many albums of interest to me or that were compelling or strange or revealing to me. And revealing in the sense like culture or something like that. So, I almost considered taking all 9 tracks and being like, you know what, I'm just gonna fucking spend a whole episode on this. But I'm like, nah, let me not do that. That seems like a waste of time. Next, we got Camila Cabello with Camila, her self-titled, I guess not entirely self-titled because she only has her first name, but her self-titled debut. Really interesting to see her evolution since leaving Fifth Harmony. Never Be the Same is really interesting because it is essentially the follow-up to Havana, or maybe it's the follow-up to Havana and OMG, because it was released how Havana and OMG were released. You just put out 2 songs, in this case, Never Be the Same and Real Fence, and see which one sticks. Initially, fun fact, OMG was the song that was more popular when Havana and OMG were released, but I'm assuming that her label pushed it. I mean, and I know that they've been pushing this album stupid hard so that it goes #1 and just, they meet maybe there needs to be some kind of fiscal, number for this quarter. But this shit was, on the homepage, on everybody's homepage of YouTube. Everybody, no matter what your interests are, it was on everybody's homepage. And you could only exit out of that you could only remove it from your homepage if you had a mobile device. So that's interesting. So it's really been pushed. And this song in this album feels so summery. It doesn't feel like this should be in this season. It does not feel like a winter album. Adele is what I think of when I think of like a winter album, or maybe like Ed Sheeran's Multiply or something. Like the parts that more like ballad like. Just because the more excited, energetic shit it makes you depressed when you live in Maine or not even Maine, like Georgia, because we just had some snow. And you can't go out and have a pool party because it's freezing. This song, Never Be the Same, feels grand in the sense that there are a lot of pop songs who are doing this kind of grand, builds up kind of track, with the high pitch and vocals and stuff like that. But this isn't representative of Camila's past singles. Camila has been trying to make, club bangers, it seems like. Whatever the equivalent of that is in the pop world, but not EDM or anything like that when I say club banger. But essentially, I feel like this is kind of the Max Martinization of her music, because that's what he makes. He makes these anthems and grandiose music and shit like that, like Bad Blood or what's the other song? Shake It Off. So it's more in that kind of vein. This is Camila's sort of Taylor Swift album. And it's kind of weird to hear from her because I felt like she was moving towards more of a Rihanna direction. And that's kind of what I felt like listening to this song Inside Out. I don't know why this wasn't released as a lead single. I guess because they felt like the more grandiose thing would obviously sell. I think that her label, in a way, is using her Cuban heritage in a similar way that, you know, labels used Rihanna's Caribbean heritage. And I'm not saying, like, or Def Jam used Rihanna's Caribbean heritage. And I'm not saying that's like a good or a bad thing, because what they always typically do, or not, I can't say always and typically, but what they typically do is they take like a facet of your heritage and implement it into your music, but they won't ever like put you straight out into the mainstream as you are. You know what I mean? Like Rihanna didn't come out singing fucking work. You know what I mean? Like she had to like build herself up to be able to like express some kind of like, you know, semblance, like some strong semblance of her heritage, because you know people were saying when work came out, I can't even understand this, you know, because of the way she's speaking. But essentially, you know, like this is the same thing where maybe they're trying to start her out more pop and then move her towards that place where she just, you know, has a Spanish album or something, and they're just taking her completely international, which I'm sure that she's international already. But everybody knows when you're bilingual and, you know, you've already got your footing in another country, it's easier to take off like on the world stage and just stay there. Look at Shakira, look at J-Lo, you know, stuff like that. This song Inside Out has the kind of bounce that reminds me of, you know, Taylor Swift's Red Days, where she was making songs like I Knew You Were Trouble When You Walked In and We Are Never Getting Back Together. It kind of has that vibe of it with the piano. But then the steel drums come in and it just feels like a little Caribbean bounce, a little bop. It sounds like Controlla, Drake's Controlla, plus Taylor Swift, basically. Like any Taylor Swift song from the Red era. Or maybe just any Taylor Swift song in general. I don't know. Maybe not like from her last album, because her last album was kind of a divergence from that. And then you have Real Friends, a song that it sounds so much like Ed Sheeran. It's kind of crazy. This speaks to the Max Martinization of her music. But I initially had plans to put this song in the new tracks when it came out like over a month ago. It probably would have been like the very first NyuMu. But it seems like it's, I don't know, it made sense to talk about it now because it's much more representative of this album's themes and the sonic palette that this album is trying to like provide for you, or provide for a listener. Not necessarily you. I'm not saying that you would listen to this, whoever you are. I'm just talking to no one at this point. The song is pretty interesting within the context of Camila's leaving Fifth Harmony, just because of how the way the group was formulated. Basically, they just said, hey, we need some attractive women who can sing. They didn't even know each other. They put them in together. I think this was like Simon Cowell's doing or something like that. And they're like, bam, here's your band. And so with that, her saying like, you know, all I want is some real friends, even if this is, you know, a song that was written for her, the sentiment definitely feels there. Which I always appreciate when, you know, even if you're delivered a song, you kind of transform and make it your own. You know, think like Calm Eye from Wednesday Campanella. For people who know about Wednesday Campanella, or Suyobi no Campanella, as they say in Japan. It's kind of that kind of thing where the song is, or Drake, you know how people like talk shit about him, you know, having ghost written music, but the song isn't made until that artist brings it to life. Otherwise, it's just words on a piece of paper and it's nothing. It has no personality. And that's how I feel about this Real Friends track. Next into it, her pitchy voice that she does, the little, I don't even know how to do I don't even know how to do it. But it sounds exactly like Taylor Swift's pitchy voice on this song. And it's fitting of her style. Look, I know that Camila is friends with Taylor Swift. They probably listen to each other's music. No, they definitely listen to each other's music. So I'm not sure if it's just something like they work with the same producers and they both kind of demand that from the two artists vocally. But I was like, wait, what? Is there a Taylor Swift? I wasn't like that, but I could almost be like that. Like, oh my God, there's a Taylor Swift feature on this album. I didn't even know. It's interesting because she's talking about her sexuality and like getting into bed, and you know, she's not explicitly saying she has having sex, but talking about sexuality in the mainstream when you're on a pop star on like a Taylor Swift level, which she is practically in at least in terms of the money they're putting in to her. You know, she's on the Taylor Swift kind of Ed Sheeran level. It's weird to be a female pop star and talk about sexuality like this, like, oh, you're in the bed, get into it. But like, I feel like that's kind of, you know, edging her towards that kind of Rihanna vibe. Because even when Rihanna came out, she wasn't super sexual until like, you know, Good Girl Gone Bad. And she's definitely has that good girl lane, but she also is like this, like, I would almost say she's like a teenage heartthrob, which is kind of weird because that doesn't really happen with female artists. That's more like a male artist thing. But I could definitely see a bunch of 12-year-old boys having like a poster of Camila Cabello on their wall. You know, it's a little fitting, honestly. I didn't even have that in my notes, but that would be cool if we just kind of entered that era. I mean, like, what had 12-year-old boys had on their walls before this time? Like, basically porn or video games or something like that. So if we moved into an era where there are like female teenage heartthrobs that are like bona fide teenage heartthrobs and not just like, you know, like little cutesy pop stars, that would be interesting. I feel like Rihanna was like the closest thing to that, but she didn't necessarily have the age thing down. Like Rihanna's always been like 23 or in my head. Like she's never been younger than 23 in my head. Even though when she started, I think she was like 18. But she never really looked that way. So it didn't really matter. She always looked like an adult. This is different. Camila looks like she could go to high school or she could be in college. And I think she's my age. I think she's literally like 19 or 20 or something like that. So, I mean, it fits. Let's see where that goes. Probably not where I'm saying it will go. I'm not even predicting that. I'm just saying, like, it kind of feels like that. Next we got Sugar. So I have this new segment that I was kind of like, you know, hinted towards. I have this new segment called New Years Ago. Not like New Year's Eve or New Year like that. Like these albums were new in this week, you know, years ago. So I got some albums from, I got an album from 1999, an album from 2002, an album from 2010. I didn't arbitrarily pick the years. I literally just went on Wikipedia and I painstakingly looked through these albums, said, oh, this was released in January 12th or something like that of 2010. Like, oh, like this was new, you know, 7 or 8 years ago. Well, it'll be 8 years ago, not 7. But yeah, so that's where the kind of inspiration for this came from. Also that, and there wasn't really any interesting music, so, and then I didn't have an artist spotlight planned, so I'm just like, let me just do this. You know, that will work out. Also, I want to take the time out to say, if you want to look up the playlists for all these songs and the past songs that I've also talked about, please do that, because otherwise I feel like I'm just talking to a wall. Like, if people don't actually listen to this music, then like, what the fuck are you coming for? I'm not that interesting of a person. Lol. First, we got Sugar Ray with 1459, and that's like a timestamp, not like a year. It's a pop punk kind of album. Also, I didn't say what Camila Cabello's album was, which is also called Camila. If I kind of said that, but for some reason I forgot. Anyways, this is a pop punk album. That at first, I feel like the first track in the album actually tries to trick you into thinking it's like a metal album. It's even called New Direction, and it's the intro track, and it sounds like a metal song. And then it comes into the song I'm about to talk about, which, I mean, a lot of people know it. I feel like you probably heard the song in passing. It's called Every Morning. And it's just like one of those classic kind of 1999, 1998 feeling songs where it's just like, it's teetering on that kind of bad lyrics kind of, well, I woke up in the morning and I went to the store or something. I don't know. It just kind of feels like cheesy, like in that really late 90s kind of way. It's so blatantly casual and of its time. It's kind of like feeding into the idea of the album's title. So the album's titled 1459, and essentially, you know, they say you have 15 minutes of fame and then you're up. Well, they're like, well, we're at 1459. So either you can look at it from two perspectives. Either they have 1 minute left, or they have 14 minutes and 59 minutes left, or 14 minutes and 59 seconds left. Or sorry, let me redo that. Either they have 1 second left, or they have 14 minutes and 59 seconds left. So that's just kind of like the idea, I feel like. Or maybe it's just like an idea of, hey, they're on the clock, because that would make more sense than me fucking saying shit about like doing math. It's just not even hard math. I'm just stupid. Well, I'm just stupid right now. Lol. I need to stop saying lol. It's so cringy. Next, we got Someday, which is it's pretty much Every Morning Part 2. I mean, unless you consider the fact that Every Morning has these weird kind of like rappy qualities to it. That was another thing they were trying to do in like the late 90s, like these little like rap pop songs. Just stop. They're like rap, pop, and rock all in one, and it's so corny. But like it goes over kind of well with Sugar Ray. I feel like that's kind of maybe that's the stuff that critics were so hard on them for like preceding this album. But they fully just take it on. They're so unashamed and chill about it. And yet again, you have another January album because this is kind of keeping into the theme. Like this is the feel of January, where you just have all these albums that are basically delayed summer albums, and they sound exactly like summertime. And they're even like in the later album that I'm going to talk about, they're even talking about summertime. You know what I mean? So it's just like an interesting concept. The instrumentation on this album, next song, Burning Dog, and the instrumentation on this album, or on this song, I put in this album on my notes for some reason because I'm stupid. But the instrumentation is so like disorienting and like, whoa, I'm in your ear, I'm in the left ear, like doing that little stereo trick thing. And it's so sporadic and truly a standout instrumentation, or there's standout instrumentation on this track. That is basically an aside from the rest of the album. The album teeters from like punk to pop, but it's mostly pop music. And this is kind of one of those glimpses into punk. There are more punk songs. There's one song that was on like the Max Keeble soundtrack. That song sounds pretty pop punk, but a lot of this shit just sounds like pop music, to be honest, from 1999. And then next we have Even Though, which is it has like a cutesy aspect of it that reminds me of like Grease or something, like the tunes from Grease, and it has like a little bit of a surf rock influence. So this song is a pretty good representation of the diversity of sound and style. Well, more so diversity in style of the group. They push into pop punk, they push into pop, or they are pop. But then they have some some surf rock for the people who are really interested in that. I'm not even sure if that's the right genre. I'm not really too enveloped in genres, so I don't really know. Okay, that's just what I feel like. That's what I'm hearing at least. Next, we got the Notwist. I've never actually had to say their names, the band name out loud. With Neon Golden. This came out 3 years after the last time I just talked about Sugar Ray. And this album is a post-rock, glitch pop kind of album. Actually, it's not the first track. The second track, Pilot, was the first kind of nod to me that this was going to be like a truly special album, because it comes in and it has like this sputtering guitar that reminds me so much of Gross Beat. If you ever produce in FL Studio, there's this plugin called Gross Beat, and basically it's like a time delay kind of thing that makes your music instantly sound glitchy as fuck. And overall, this song is like a compelling start to something that is setting you up to be both dreary and ethereal. It's got that kind of vibe to it. It's like depressing, but it's like also has this like uplifting, like floaty kind of vibe to it. But it's not like super atmospheric and like spacey or anything like that. And then you have a song called This Room, which reminds me so much of the Herbs soundtrack. And if you go to like this place in Herbs is a video game that's basically The Sims, but it's like The Sims in the city, whatever. It just had like when you play Herbs, there's this place called like the Foundry or something, and they play nothing but industrial like music and shit like that. And I think it's called industrial music, or at least that's what I feel like it's called. They play nothing like industrial music and just shit like that. And it reminds me so much of that. It's kind of like that, and then it takes some influence from pretty depressing sounding rock that borders on like emo in its tone, at least. So it's not really an emo song. It's just like some of the lyrical choices and how some of the guitars work. It feels a little emo, like not emo, but maybe just depressed. Not full on emo, but just depressed. That's how I kind of feel about it, Next we got a song called Off the Rails, which gives me so much Unison vibes. There's a song by Bjork called Unison, by way of Vespertine. The album is called Vespertine. It came out in 2001. This came out in 2002. And so they came out within the same year, actually. And it's sounds so much in like the kind of composition and like the instrumentation choice and like the instruments themselves. I guess it's the same thing as instrumentation choice. I'm just a little scatterbrained. But it's just so representative of that era of, I guess, indie electronica, you know, that 2000, 2001 indie electronica scene. So it makes sense to me. I don't know. Kind of gives me some Interpol vibes, but like the slightest Interpol vibes. You know, one person, I have to make this comment. One person on the internet, you know how that works, on Metacritic, actually. I don't know why I was looking at the Metacritic. I just want to know what people thought about this album because it's a super underground kind of indie album. Not a lot of people talk about it. Just want to know the people who had, you know, heard it, what they thought. And the critics love it. The listeners love it. But one person said, yeah, this is gonna be an album that has no longevity, and this is not gonna age well. And hey, this shit still sounds interesting today. You know, the only thing that sounds kind of dated is the glitch effects, because like, I mean, honestly, the glitchy sputtering guitar sounds like gross beat, but it doesn't even sound like, you know, like modern gross beat. It just sounds like some pretty like the first pattern in gross beat type shit. But I guess it's just it's representative of the times, you know. It's just the computer technology wasn't there, I guess, to make super insane glitch pop, or maybe they weren't too concerned with. It's just like there's some glitch pops in certain areas, but this is not a glitch pop album by any means. If that just gives you more perspective of like what I'm trying to say. One person also said, because this is a post rock album. And so one person was like, "Yeah, this album is the period on the end of rock music. Like this is just like the nail in the coffin for rock music. This album basically just screams rock is dead because it's such a divergence from that kind of like, you know, grunge punk. Like it's so different from that. You know, it's just like this is the 2000s. This is what the fuck everything is gonna sound like from now on in this decade, and it's pretty representative of that. I'm not sure how many people actually heard this album, but this album is a pretty good like vertical slice in terms of like, at least to my understanding, it's a pretty good vertical slice of like post rock in that decade, which I'm not an expert on, so don't quote me on that shit. Next, we got Vampire Weekend with Contra. Came out in 2010, 8 years after this last record, Neon Golden, that I just talked about by the Notwist. And it's indie pop. This is Vampire Weekend's second album. And honestly, also, I just want to make the note. Sugar Ray's 1459 was their third album, and Notwist Neon Golden was their fifth album. This is Vampire Weekend's second album. Sorry, I just had to say that. And honestly, the first album they put out, I wasn't like, you know, it wasn't necessarily for me. You know, I didn't really have any glaring problems with it. And there's that one song that everybody knows from that album that I really forget. But if you played me the melody, I would instantly be like, oh, that's Vampire Weekend. But I don't know, they come back again and they have like all these like video gamey types of sample. Well, not, I guess not sampling, or just instrumentation of their music, and it sounds like a whole different band in a way, but they're still making the same kind of, I guess, kind of cute appeal. Like that's the only way I can really explain Vampire Weekend. They're cute, but they're not like overly cute with it. They just feel like a quirky little band. So the first song, what an interesting opener, Horchata. Honestly, I cannot believe the goal of Vampire Weekend. They put the most summer sounding song that I heard like all of last or this week or whatever. The first song on their album that came out like January 14th or something of 2010 is like the most summery song I've ever heard. I've heard of the week. So I'm just like, what the fuck? Hello, I'm kidding. I'm gonna stop using this whole summer argument where just like, if you put out a summer sounding album in the winter, you're a bad person. Like, I'm not even trying to say you're a bad person. I'm just saying it's just interesting. But you know, it's got that kind of like Super Mario-esque instrumentation. There's like this little little like drum beat in the song, and it's literally Super Mario. It's like kind of hilarious. But I don't know, it just speaks to their very odd yet refined taste that is so quirky, but yet so pop, you know? Next you got the song White Sky, which has this really infectious, like, pitchy vocal harmonizing that gives this song this really weird, like, festive almost sense to it. And then you have a song like California English, which I feel like this song is a mumble rap song before there was even like mainstream mumble rap. Of course, Lil Wayne invented mumble rap with I Can't Believe It back in 2009 or 2008. So it's not quite the first mumble rap song, but there is mumbling and there is an obscene amount of autotune. Maybe not an obscene amount, but there's a lot of autotune. And the vocal delivery is literally Future's vocal delivery. The vocal delivery that he uses to this day. Not like the vocal delivery that he was using in 2011, the 2017 Future vocal delivery, whenever he tries to sing or anything like that. And it's honestly a little scary that they kind of like predated that a little bit, that whole mumble rap wave. Mumble rap. I said mumble rap. That whole mumble rap wave. And it's just interesting to think that they kind of predated that whole phase. Especially considering what the song is about. It's about California English and like the way they talk, I guess. I'm not some kind of master of analytics, but that's what I kind of got from those albums. And that's what I kind of got for the feel of this week. Even though I couldn't pull, necessarily albums from this week, I pulled them from this week years ago. And I felt like I still give, a pretty representative, I can't even talk, a pretty representative, like kind of slice of, what January 2018 on the 18th looked like, years ago. I was going to talk about A$AP Rocky's Long Live A$AP, but I just feel like while the album definitely has its place, it was too representative of the times. For example, the No Golden album, it kind of felt like it defined the sound a little bit. A$AP Rocky's sound on that album, for me, wasn't as compelling or interesting just because, he has Skrillex on the album. He has those dark pitch vocals that, Tyler, the Creator, did 2 years before on Goblin. And I just felt like that album is more representative of times rather than the times representing the album. Is that even like a right way to phrase that? I don't know. I'm just kind of saying shit. But I was just like, when you had Skrillex on there, I'm just like, dog, so you were really just picking what was popular. And so that's why I really didn't want to, bring that album up too much. Not to say this about album, it definitely has some bangers on it, like the first track, like Fucking Problems. So, hey, but we're just going to leave it like that. And I just want to let you guys know that 11th episode, I guess this is like the 8th episode of the first season, but I'm still going strong. I'm still consistent. And live from the closet, I'm out.